Alright, okay. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and a very good day, good afternoon to everyone. So for today's community of practice at CETAL, I'm going to talk about one of the cooperative learning methods that I have used together with my colleague, Dr. Azrina. It's known as Teams Games Tournament, and we are going to share how we implemented it in our tutorial sessions and how we get feedback from the activity. Okay, so just an overview, what we're going to share is why we choose to do Teams Games Tournament and how did we conduct it. And after that, how did the students respond? And also some of the things that we'll share with what we've learned from our experience. Okay, so why Teams Games Tournament? Okay, these are some of the problems that we face in our class. First of all, we felt that the tutorials are slow moving, slow energy inside the tutorial, and sometimes the students, they wait for answers to be given to the questions. Most of the time, they will spend 5 to 10 minutes not knowing how to start on given questions if they work on their own. Even if we pair them up, like for example using Think Pair Share, they prefer working on their own, and it doesn't get anywhere. And also, most of the time they come unprepared coming to the tutorials. That will be the first time they see the questions or even sometimes the lecture slides. So why we do it, it's actually by by an accident. I tried it out. I'm not sure how it will affect how the students' response will be, but I decided, okay, why not? Let's try this Teams Games Tournament method. At least it will be something new. Alright, so just a brief sort of introduction to what is Teams Games Tournament. If you go into the formal cooperative learning or the team-based learning workbook, you will see that this is one of the common methods being suggested, where students are divided into teams of 4, and they will compete in what are regular, we call tournaments. That's where the name comes from. And the tournaments doesn't have to only take place using tutorial questions. We can have other games. I've mixed it up with jigsaw puzzles as well. And the groups or student teams can be made of students with mixed ability. So far in the electrical and electronics engineering department, I've started out using it in my instrumentation and measurement class. That's a semester 5, third year, first semester students. We've also extended it to probability and random processes. That's still my course, second year, second sem. Also, Dr. Azrina's class in electrical technology. That will be a computer engineering, smaller group in semester 1. And then also in Dr. Norashikin's class of signals and systems. So what we're going to talk about today will be our experience from the instrumentation and measurement and also from electrical technology classes. Okay, so I'm giving over to my colleague, Dr. Azrina. Okay, sorry.
Thanks. Thank you, Ms. Suhaila. Okay, I'm going to talk about how we conducted a team games tournament in our class. So my implementation is a bit different from Ms. Suhaila. But this is basically the same idea that we did. So at the beginning of tutorials, we assign the students to team, and also we assign questions to each team. 4 questions. We assign 4 questions or more for short questions. We chose short questions because the time is very limited. Sometimes we can assign more questions and we can pick randomly. Okay, and also we also inform students at the beginning of the tournament that each member will answer a randomly assigned question out of 4 based on the tournament table. Okay, so they will get random questions. And then, so what we did was we marked the answers and we calculated the scores after the tournament. And there are 2 types of scores here. One is individual score to evaluate the performance of individual. And then based on the individual score, we use it to calculate the team average score. And Also, we realized that it's very important to have extra tutorial questions and answer scheme. This is very important from our experience. Sometimes the students tend to just memorize the answers without understanding the solutions or the working of the questions. So to avoid this, we prepared extra questions. Okay, and then it's also important to have GAs to help marking or peer marking, because we grade or we mark the answers immediately after the tournament. So we need help because we need to keep to the time limit. And also in my case, I exercise the peer marking. So this is very important. Students learn something from this. How I did it. So basically, I distributed the answer schemes to students. And then I gave them the answer scheme as well, the answers and also the answer schemes. And they need to identify where the mistakes are. And then the grading, I will do the grading later. Okay, the next one. Okay, right. Before we conducted the tournament, we have to form the team. So the optimum team size is between 3 to 4 members and should not exceed 5. This is because of the time constraint, and also in our case, every student will get a random questions, right? So they do not know which question they will get, so they need to understand each question. So if we give more questions, that means they have more time to study. So I think 3 to 4 members is the obvious, the optimum or the best team size. All right. So grouping criteria is up to the instructors. So you can randomly group the students, or you can group the student based on academic achievement, and also you can also group them according to their gender. So you have a mix between male and female students, or different race. Okay, this is how we conducted team games tournament in tutorial. So basically there are 3 modes or 3 levels or stages of team game tournament. The first one, the first stage is called discussion mode. It's around 1.5 hours. So in this, let me see if we can show the animation. Back, teach. Okay. So, for example, here we have 4 teams with 4 members. Okay, then we assign 4 questions to each team, right? Sorry, we assign 4 questions to all teams, all students. So they need to understand and to be able to do all questions, because they will get a random question later on. And then after that, they discuss their team strategies. So this is to discuss. For example, because they have 1.5 hours, so they need to, basically as a facilitator, we went into each table and we asked them, facilitated them, asked them how they're going to how they're going to conduct the discussion. Are they going to answer them together within 1.5 hours, or are they going to do it independently, and then after that they consolidate the answers? So this one we have to facilitate. Okay, the next mode is tournament mode. So this is roughly around 30 to 45 minutes. So what we did was, each member from each team will choose which tournament table to join. So you would see in table 1, there's a representative of each team, right? And then we will randomly assign 1 question to each team. So they have about half an hour to 45 minutes to answer, depending on the number of questions they have. Right? And then we assign the questions, question 5 to table 1, question 7 to table 2, and so on. Right? And finally, the last stage is called closure. So in this stage, we graded the submission immediately, and then we must prepare the answer scheme. So this is where we need the help from the GAs to grade the answers. Okay. And after that, we calculate the individual grade as well as the team average. For example, here we get the average of each team members. average of the team. Okay, right. So this is what we get the feedback in. My subject is electrical technology. So we graded the answers at the end of tutorial, and we get the immediate feedback. So this is an example of tournament table with the marks or the scores of each group. Okay, and then in my case, I use the individual score for formative assessments to see which student is struggling in the class, who needs more help. And also I use the team average score for a reward. So I gave them a prize. Okay. So this is what I learned. So how did the students respond in the class? What I noticed was we received a lot of questions during the discussion. So most of the time we are not sitting around. We're not sitting. We have to move around a lot. And it's very tiring, but it's very satisfying. It's very active situation where the students keep asking questions and then discussing between them. So we have peer questioning and teaching, not only within but also between teams. So the students keep moving around, so it's very dynamic, so very happening in the class. Okay, and the response in my case varies based on the dynamic of the team. I have several cases. For example, in case one, where I have this one student who is very advanced, who always came prepared to the class. He did all the questions in the textbooks. So the question that I gave for this tournament is very easy for him. So, but the good thing is he's not controlling the group. The drawback is the other students are taking advantage of him. So they tend to wait for the answers from him or asking him to teach the other students. So it's very, very important for us as a facilitator to make sure that the student, the advanced student, did not give the answer right away to their friends. They need to discuss or making sure that their friends have already attempted the question first before giving the answers. Okay, and in second case, I have a group where they're not confident in answering questions. They have attempted the questions, they got the answers, but they are not sure. So we also have to help them to gain confidence, and we need to look at their workings and give advice and see where the problems are. Is it because they're not sure of the equation that they had, So this is also very important. So the good thing is we can identify students who are struggling in their teams and need extra help. Okay. Okay, Ms. Suhaila.
Sorry, it's a bit confusing because we're doing a tech team work here. Okay, so that was Dr. Azrina's in her electrical technology class. So in mine, it's for instrumentation and measurement class. This is where I first started it out. I could see, because I had the opportunity to teach the same batch, however for different classes. So I can see their responses is more or less the same as in the electrical technology class. Before, it was such a struggle to get them to start attempting the questions. I need to keep on asking, where do we start? But when we use this particular technique, they started out on their own. And more often, the questions we have is more on, whether this is correct, and should we do this, and so on. So they were already talking about the methods or exploring ways to solve questions, which was good. At least the second, it's not stuck in the first place. However, I also noticed that team strategies between teams, they have different, as Dr. Azrina rightly pointed out, they have different dynamics, so therefore the strategies vary. Some teams are very, very independent. They can work on their own. We don't need to tell them much about how to divide their work, how to divide the questions, but some may need guidance on how to effectively work together. Although this is pretty small, they can be sometimes, especially during the beginning when we started it out, for some students, because they felt this, they know they have to solve these questions by the end of the tutorial session because they have a tournament coming up, which is good. However, sometimes when they come unprepared, it will be their first time reading the slides or reading the lecture materials because they need to solve it. On one hand, yes, they didn't come prepared, but at least they would have seen it before, say, a bigger assessment like test 1. So in a way, it forces them to read the slides and not depend on their colleagues, right? So it's very, very, now our role is turning into a facilitator where we encourage teams to find the answers, and it's very, very tempting to give them the answers, but we try not to. Just provide hints, ask them more questions to find the ways to solve the questions themselves. And I find also that whenever they ask me whether this is correct, I would ask them back, how do you know that it's correct? Or how do you check their answers? And it gets us to play a different role rather than just, okay, this is the method, but okay, how do we know this method is correct and how do we check your answers? So we get to solve or at least address another learning issue, which is how to check our facts, check our methods correctly, okay? And then, especially during the first few times that we do this, we have to remind the members to share, especially if they had divided the questions. Midway through this discussion, to come together and share their working with the other members to make sure that everybody knows this, because they can get very, very into solving the questions and they forgot about this. Probably in the future, we may get one of the students or to take turns to be the timekeeper. Okay, what we learned from the experience, slightly different way that I used assessment in my instrumentation and measurement class compared to Dr. Azrina's class. For the individual answers, it becomes a tutorial marks. We have a component for tutorial marks, quite small, sometimes between 5 to 10%. However, the team average, to make the stake higher or to get them more excited about it, I say that if they show consistent performance or improved performance, I'll give them extra bonus for test 1. So that really gears up. And on top of that, if I do track the team average across weekly submissions, I can see a correlation between weekly low team average. If the team average is low, most often than not, the students within it or the team members, they need help, and quite a number of the members from these teams are struggling in test 1 and also final exam. So, however, this is a hindsight. It was not something I noticed during the while conducting the tutorial session. However, it is something worthwhile for me to look at for my future classes, and that's what I'm doing for my probability and random processes class this semester. So if I look at the team average and they're not improving or they are decreasing for that matter, then definitely that particular team needs help. Okay, I think the biggest, we can't say so much in terms of if someone were to ask, how does it impact student learning, for example? For me, I have not used it for the same class twice in succession, so I cannot compare it yet. I will be able to compare it by the end of this semester. However, I think the biggest improvement we've seen so far in class is how they are now more actively and independently engaged. We don't have to probe them as much during tutorial. Once they know that they're going to do the tournament, they literally divide the question themselves, find the answers, and if they're not sure, they're asking us the questions. So that's good, rather than we asking them more or less how are they doing. And they feel more accountable. That's one reason why they are more engaged. They are more accountable to their team. Some of them stayed back just to see how the other team members fare, and if we are putting the marks on the whiteboard, they'll be waiting for the rest of the marks to come in. We didn't ask them to stay, but they do. So they felt more sense of belonging. All right. However, in terms of readiness, I think in order to make sure that we have enough time for this activity, it would be good if the students can come prepared, so we need to give them the tutorial set much a week earlier perhaps, so then they can come prepared to discuss the questions. On our part, or as instructors, we need to plan for immediate grading, so we have to have the answer scheme ready. The score tables take a short time to do it, but it does take some time to fill it up. And then it's also good to report, if we can't report the score table during that particular session itself, perhaps in the next one we should report, so then they can get a sense of how their team is doing. Right? I think that also plays a part. Right, and if we can do this and we plan for it, then time management for this activity can be much easier. Alright, other than that, what we learned from the experience is be careful with the tutorial questions that you choose, because it has happened to me. I thought they were of similar difficulty, but one was more difficult than the others. So because we do not make differences between the team members, because the questions are randomly assigned during the tournament. Although we would like to point out that if anyone were to review literature on this activity, Teams Games Tournament, it has been used for some time. The paper that we've referred to are published in 1978 and 1980. So, however, they recommended that harder questions are given to students who are higher, who are well performing, okay, and even higher grades, but we do not take that route. We make sure that all the questions are similar in difficulty level. But it is also important to choose questions of similar difficulty. Tutorial set, yep. This one is something we would like to highlight, that it would be good to have extra questions. Why? It happened to me during the second time I'm doing this. The students found out an answer scheme from an earlier tutorial set where some of the questions are similar. So they brought the answer scheme with them. But what I have was a larger tutorial set, more questions. So what happened is I gave a different questions during the discussion, but I changed the questions during the tournament mode, but making sure that they have the same concept, probably changes in values. So they were taken aback by that. So students who really discussed the questions during the tournament were able to answer it. Those who just came thinking that they could copy it from the answer scheme could not. So sort of, in a way, teaching them that it doesn't pay. So that's why we would like to emphasize on really having a good bank of tutorial questions. And then students really appreciate the immediate feedback. That's why the answer scheme is handy, so we can mark it straight away. Alright, conclusions. That will be one of our last slides. So why we are doing this, and we hope to continue doing this, however with some changes or updates, because we like what we see with the active student participation and increased engagement during the tutorials, so it's more lively. We feel more tired by the end of our tutorials now, and we just can't give it to the GAs. I think we most of us, we like it being in the tutorials because we can get more questions, and we also know where they are facing difficulties. Students feel accountable for their teams, and then they also like the immediate feedback. We like it as well, so that they can learn directly after we've given them their grading back. So future recommendations would be, since we see some team members are doing the same thing, or other team members are relying on the same member, so what we do is we would like to rotate roles, and we'll get them to record. So roles like fact checker, timekeeper, and also those who are explaining the questions. And other than tutorial questions, we'd like to add variety to the instructional activities, perhaps with presentation, or probably a bit more problem-based or a longer, lengthier questions. Explore different ways of rewarding the students. For example, those who come prepared, perhaps if they are finishing early, or probably they add more questions, for example, we gave them extra marks. Okay, so those are the kind of recommendations that probably we'll take up in the future. Okay, so this is the references. So far we've not seen one at the college level, but this one is the report that the creator of this particular activity has given to the Department of Education in the States. So if you are interested, there are quite a number of literature on Teams Games Tournament. So I think we didn't add the extra one. Okay. So that will be it. Yep. Questions, if any?
From the viewers also.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you.